Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Parent Partnership Talk this evening. I'm very grateful to all of those who are watching live at the moment, and also to anyone who is clicking this and watching it as live, perhaps slightly after the event start time. Thank you so much for taking the time for parents from years 5 through the girls prep and boys prep and all the way up to year 9 in the senior school for coming along to listen to Peter Cowley talk to us this evening. Peter's going to be talking about online safeguarding. He's the lead advisor for online services and safety for Achieving for Children. So in relation to us, that means that Peter works for the organisations that we work with as our safeguarding partners in order to help protect your young people and to keep them safe. And we take a lot of what we talk to your children about, we take from the advice that Peter and AFC are able to provide to us. I've had the privilege of hearing Peter speak most years now for the last 4 or 5 years, I think. Although he maybe could confirm whether that's true or not at some point. And I have to say, as a parent myself to a young boy, I've learned a lot over the years, and I'm sure you will do too when you listen to this evening. There is a question feature through the app, so Peter's talk will last for about 45 to 50 minutes. And if you have any questions during that time, please do pop them into the questions on the Teams app. And at the end, I'll be able to go through the questions and we'll pitch any questions that you have to Peter. And without further ado, Peter, thank you for your time as well this evening, and I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stuart. That's marvellous. Right, so let's kick off. We know why we're here. If you know what one of those is and you know what to do with it, then do it now. It's a QR code, of course. And for those of you who are new to this, if you've got a smartphone on you, just start up your camera. You don't need to take a picture of it, just point it at that code, which I'm doing now, actually. And it should come up with a link somewhere on your screen, which you can tap, and it will then take you to some resources that I put together for you. If you're thinking, what's he on about? Don't worry, because here's another way of doing it that will get you to the same information. That's you put that into any web browser on any device, bit.ly stroke all lowercase SHS safe. You see what I did there? So that's SHS safe, and that will get you to the same stuff. And you'll see, I think, 4 items. The first 2 folders are folders on my screen anyway, on my phone, and then there's the session notes, which is this actual presentation just as a flat PDF file, and also a parental safeguards leaflet too, but more about that in a couple of minutes. If we get any late arrivals, don't worry, because I'll be doing that again at the end, so you can have the link again at the end. And of course, please do feel free to circulate that link to anybody, because they'll be able to access it just as easily. All right, so online safeguarding is our topic. I'd like to break it down into 2 sort of top level sections, if you like, 2 main sections. That's protecting the devices that they use, and then indeed protecting themselves. So the first bit you could describe as being sort of proactive, really, things that you can do, really quite simple things, to lessen the chances of anything risky happening to them in the second half, which is when we'll look at some aspects of risky behaviour in protecting themselves. So in terms of protecting devices, I want to talk fairly obviously about things like apps, smartphones and tablets. Also, we'll mention games consoles, because all of them, even the tiny portable ones, they all connect to the internet these days, don't they? And finally, in the first section, a few pointers to some extra resources you may find useful for your home broadband. Now, when it comes to protecting themselves, I'd like to say a few things about an increasing number of apps and games these days that allow you to contact potentially strangers and indeed live stream, which is effectively like having a TV station in your bedroom, you know, so you can broadcast whatever you're doing to one or even many other people. What could possibly go wrong? So we'll have a look at that, and also some wider aspects around sharing stuff, things that they're sharing and maybe oversharing, and also things that possibly other people are sharing about them. And then finally, a few little pointers towards social media use for the slightly older ones. A few pointers to maybe keeping things under control a little bit as well, if you're concerned that they might not be. Okay, so in terms of protecting the devices that they use, the number 1 top tip, which I've had now for donkey's years really, but it's still just as true as it was when I started this game, and that basically in a nutshell is set the parental safeguards before they get anywhere near the device. bit late now for Christmas, isn't it? But if they're getting some shiny new internet capable device for their birthday or whatever, or another celebration, then before they get anywhere near it, get it out of the box, plug it in, switch it on, and follow the maker's instructions for how to set up the parental safeguards. Now, I can help you with that, because one of the items in that link I gave you at the beginning is this sheet that looks like this. Here, in a nutshell, on one piece of paper, is how to set up the parental safeguards on, from the left to right, Apple, Android, Kindle, Xbox, Nintendo and Sony PlayStation. You'll see that the QR codes are there that we used before, but also if you open up this file on your device, it won't work now, of course, because you're watching me presenting, rather like watching a film. But if you open this up on your device, this file, then you can also tap or click the appropriate icons and it will take you to the relevant stuff as well. I could do this now, but it's a bit risky because it'll mean I'll drop out of the presentation and it may be a bit of a faff to try and get back in again. So trust me, honest God, it really will work. So there, all in one place, is how to set up the parental safeguards. Now, you'll obviously want to tell the device how old your child or children are. I would also suggest that you set up the device so that they themselves cannot download any apps or games, any. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, they can't have any, because it would be a very boring device, wouldn't it, if they couldn't actually do anything with it. But you should be the gatekeeper. You should be the bouncer, so to speak. You should be the one who's deciding what they can and cannot have. Now, you might think, of course, well, that's all very well, but what if they ask me for something I never heard of? I can help you with that. So hold that thought just for a minute. But get it set up so they can't download any apps or games. Obviously, also set it up so that they can't access your credit card and spend any money without you knowing. And get it set up in that way, and a few other whistles and bells too. Just have a look at what some of the facilities are, and then save those settings, protect it with a strong password that only you know, and then finally let them have the device. And trust me, 3/4 of the problems that could potentially arise, and we sometimes hear about or read about in the press, will never arise, because they can't, simply because the device now knows how old they are and what sort of things you're happy for them to be able to do. So, as I say, that's by far, that's my number one top tip. When it comes to phones, if they're getting one when they're a little bit older or they've already got one now, here are some suggestions which I won't go through in any great detail, but things to include, if you like, in the important phone contract, which in an informal way, it doesn't have to be formalized, of course, with your child. I would suggest these are some points that are worth considering, whether they're appropriate in your particular family situation. Just a few suggestions. In particular, I think the last one is the most important. If you receive anything suspicious or worrying, tell us and we'll sort it out together. Because you see, young people's number one fear is that if they fess up to something that's gone wrong, A, it's embarrassing, but B, they're worried that you're going to react very strongly, maybe even take it off them. That's their number one fear. And if they think you're going to do that, they won't tell you. And we've got to try and keep them in that circle of trust, so to speak, if you like, for as long as we can, so that they know that if something's happened, and really, it's nothing that they've done naughty or been bad or anything. The worst you could say is that they've been a little bit naive. Well, they're children. They're going to be a bit naive, aren't they? It comes with the territory. And I think we have to factor that in. So try to limit your response if something has gone wrong to just a cooperative, supportive one, rather than flying off the handle, because if they think you're going to do that, they simply won't tell you. But anyway, there's just a few suggestions about ways in which you could maybe have some sort of agreement with your child when they perhaps get their first phone. So in a nutshell, set those parental safeguards before they get anywhere near it. Number 2 on my list is basically look at age ratings for video games and apps. If they've got a video games console, similar sort of thing, you'll probably know that they all have age ratings. The most common system looks like this. It's called the PEGI system and goes from 3 up to 18, so 3 years up to 18. 3 and 7 are for advice only, so to speak. In other words, they're kind of U certificate, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So, I mean, you could even put a 3-year-old in front of a 7-rated game. They probably wouldn't understand it. But they're not going to come to any harm. Yeah. But the other ones are different. 12, 16 and 18 have a legal basis. It's a criminal offence for a retailer to provide access to a 12, 16 or 18 rated product to any child below those ages. A criminal offence. But unlike, say, a packet of cigarettes or a bottle of vodka, it's not a criminal offence for a parent or an adult to purchase it for the child. Well, not yet, anyway. Maybe it will be one day, but it's not yet. So therefore, there's the risk that, of course, you guys are not going to fall for this, but there's always the risk, isn't there, that maybe auntie or granny or granddad and so on, they might say something like, "Oh, granddad, can I have Grand Theft Auto, please, for Christmas?" And of course, Grandad looks at it and thinks it's just a racing game, which in a sense it is. There's a darn sight more you can do with it than that. And trust me, you don't want anybody, any child anywhere near that. Certainly, unless they're somewhere near the age of 18. And in my opinion, probably not even then. But you can take a view on that yourself. But of course, the beauty of having those parental controls set up already is that even if Grandad does buy it for the child, or maybe somebody in their class lends it to them and they sneak upstairs and they put it in their Xbox or their PlayStation, it's just going to spit it straight out again because it knows that they're, say, 8 and not 18. Yeah, so you see how so many things can be sorted by having those safeguards set up in the first place. Now, I know that it does get a little bit more blurry when it comes to other apps and games. Yeah, I mean, that particular, horse bolted some time ago. You probably, I mean, here's a typical selection of, social media type apps and similar things that lots of children want or indeed already have on their devices. That's what they're all called if you're not familiar with some of the names. And here are the minimum age requirements from each app. You'll see that 13 is the most common. And although WhatsApp's a 16, I'll say something special about WhatsApp in a couple of minutes. But you see 13 is the most common. Now, let me be clear on this. I'm not nagging you and saying don't let anybody under the age of 13 anywhere near these. Because you see, the thing is, you know your child, I don't. So if you are secure in your point of view and thinking, well, I don't really see why my 11-year-old shouldn't have Instagram or whatever, well, that's up to you. Yeah, because there's nothing criminal in doing that, so long as you're confident that they're appropriately mature to be able to handle it, and they know what to do if they stumble upon anything that they're not sure about or worries them, and they know that they can talk to you, an example of an adult that they trust. Yeah, and you know that that's going to happen. So if you're secure in that, as I say, you know your child, I don't. But sometimes, of course, you might not be sure because you don't know enough about the particular app. So here's a website that I can recommend, which is internetmatters.org. And if you tap this page on your version of this, the PDF of it, it will automatically take you to the section of the internetmatters.org where you can search their big database of apps and games, and it will basically give you the full SP. It'll tell it like it is. So you as a parent then can look at the ups and downs, the risks, and in fact, it also has little quotes from other parents who say what they think the minimum age ought to be and so on. And so then you can come to a decision about that. Yeah, so you've got enough information to make an informed decision about whether that's appropriate for your child. And then I would say stick to that. Don't take any nonsense. Let me explain what I mean. I mean, we always used to say things like, everybody else has got it, didn't we? And it wasn't true when we said it, was it? And it's still not true nowadays either. And the other thing I would say is if you get into the screaming abdabs with them, if you get into I hate you and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, well, I think the proper response to that is well, I love you, and that's why I'm not letting you have it. And there's 2 points from experience that I would say to back that up. The first one is you'd be surprised how often they want you to say no. They'll never admit it, of course, but they want you to say no. They sometimes do. And the reason for that is, especially with social media apps, they see their friends using some of these apps and doing stuff on it. And they're looking at it and thinking, oh, actually, I don't think that's a very good idea. That looks pretty risky to me. You don't even know who you're talking to. They could be anybody type of stuff. Yeah. But of course, they can't say that in front of their friends. They can't wimp out in front of their mates. So you are the perfect excuse. Because then they can say, well, yeah, I want to join in as well, but my dad's rigged me phone, so I can't install it. Yeah. So you're their get out of jail free card. And the other thing I'd say as well, and this again is from experience, I've been doing this for so long now, that sometimes parents come back and watch me the sort of second time, so to speak, when they've got another brood coming through, you know. And this happened a couple of years ago, pre-lockdown, with a parent. And a mum said to me that the first time she saw me, her child was in secondary school, and now she's a second year at college, right? And she said recently, so she's about 20 years old, and recently her daughter said to her, "You know what, Mum? You were right." And so, as I say, stick to your guns, be secure in it, and also as parents stick together, right? Because there's nothing more undermining, is there, that you try to, establish what you seem to be a perfectly reasonable, sensible behaviour, so that they can stay happy and healthy online, and then, a friend of yours, the parents of one of their friends decides they're going to let them do anything they want. Yeah, so do, as parents, try to stick together over this, stick to your guns. So I can certainly commend that site to you. It's got some really, really useful information, and I'll mention it again right at the end. Quick word about WhatsApp. I said I would. You'll probably notice it stood out from the rest because it was rated 16 rather than 13. The main reason for that is that you can't stop strangers contacting your child. You can block them, or they can block them after it's happened for the first time, but you can't stop that initial contact, by which time, of course, the damage could have been done. Yeah, so that's an important point to remember. Another thing as well, a bit technical, but also on WhatsApp, all communications are what we say end-to-end encrypted. That means that as soon as any message, picture, or whatever leaves the originating device, it's scrambled in such a way that nobody, not even WhatsApp, and certainly not the police, can unscramble it until it gets to the target device where it gets delivered. So this makes it very, very difficult, if something really goes badly wrong, for the authorities to do anything about it, because it's very, very difficult to gather evidence as a result of that. Also, if you're on WhatsApp, you'll probably know that your phone number is visible to all other members of the group that you're in. And therefore, of course, there's nothing to stop anybody using that phone number for other purposes, such as making a voice call or sending texts and so on, outside of WhatsApp itself. Also, there's a new feature, and to be honest, I'm having difficulty thinking of a legitimate use for it, but it's certainly got a few illegitimate uses, which is disappearing messages, or I'm not sure what they call it. But in effect, you can set a sort of an expiry time on a message, after which it disappears permanently. And this is being used to bully children, because they might get some horrible message, and by the time they've had a chance to show it to an adult that they trust, it's disappeared. And of course, you've got no way of knowing or being able to prove where it came from because of the end-to-end encryption as well. So I just wanted to point out a few issues around WhatsApp. Another couple of apps that are on my radar at the moment are Wink and Hoop, which are similar to each other, so I'll kind of deal with them together. They're rated either 13 plus or 17 plus, but actually there's no effective age verification, which, as you probably know, is pretty much standard on social media products. The government's trying to do something about it, but it looks as if they've had to compromise to an extent that it's probably still not going to be a reliable national age verification system in place, I'm afraid. On these products, you can search for other people by location and age, indeed, and although under 18s and over 18s are supposed to be invisible to each other, there's nothing to stop you at any time going into the app and changing the age that it thinks you are, logging out and logging in again. And then you're the other side of that 18 firewall, so to speak, that age 18 firewall. So you can see some definite potential issues for predator type behavior in that case. Also, it's not possible for users to restrict who can contact them. And both apps link to Snapchat, and so basically let you browse and connect to other users. So it's a sort of way of bridging between these apps and Snapchat as well. So we've got a few concerns about those particular apps as well. But that's not to say we don't have concerns about any others. That's why have a look on internetmatters.org if you're concerned about some of the apps that are on your child's device, and just do a bit of reading about them so you're satisfied that they are or are not indeed safe enough for your child at their particular age. Now, when it comes onto broadband filtering at home, web filtering, most households who are with one of the big providers, you probably know that you have these they have this sort of family-friendly filter, or various names, set up by default, which is supposed to keep all the bad stuff out. Now, most parents, though, end up switching it off, not because they want to let a load of bad stuff in, but because often the filters are terrible. They don't block stuff that they should, and sometimes they block stuff and you think, what on earth did it block that for? Yeah. And so as a result of which, out of frustration, many parents end up switching them off, and we've switched ours off, for instance, as well, you know. But of course, if you do that and you haven't done the top bullet there, set the parental safeguards before they get near it, you're kind of back to square one again, aren't you? Because it means anybody can browse for anything. So what I would suggest is, as a starter, if you're with one of the big three internet providers, and the chances are fairly high that you are, from left to right there, we've got Virgin, BT and Sky. If you tap the appropriate panel on your PDF copy of this, it will take you to the relevant company's parent guidance section. And in some cases, it's just got advice, do's and don'ts. But in other cases, you can actually download software, special safety software, for free as a part of your subscription. So as long as you're with that particular internet provider, broadband provider, you know, you can run those various apps to keep things a little bit safer, which is certainly better than nothing. But if you want a little bit finer control, there's another couple of products that I can recommend as well. The one on the left there is OpenDNS Family Shield, which is completely free. The way this works is basically you modify a setting on your router at home, you know, the thing that does the Wi-Fi, so that instead of using your own broadband providers to do lookups of websites on the internet, you use their systems. Sounds a bit technical, but it's actually very easy to set up, and they have full instructions for a whole variety of different types of equipment you'll have in the house. Now, the reason why this is so valuable is because they then operate another check at the other end. So you set it up so that it already knows which children use which devices, and also how old they are or what age range they are. So then if on one of those devices a child tries to look for something that they shouldn't, then it will simply not allow them to access it. But you can have it set up so that you can do anything you want. If you've got somebody in the house who's very, very good, for instance, at deleting their web browsing history, well, OpenDNS thought of that. You can log in as the administrator, and you can see who's been looking at what from what device for how long, how many times a week, and whatever, you know. So it'll give you a whole load of statistics around that too. So as I say, you might also be thinking actually that if you install something like this, it's going to slow your broadband down a bit because it's going to bounce all of the inquiries off their servers. But actually, many households find that actually your broadband gets faster as a result of installing OpenDNS, because their DNS servers are very, very efficient, probably faster than your own broadband provider's servers. So actually, if anything, you'll probably find it gets a bit faster. But either way, experiment with it. It's free, so you know you're not making a financial commitment. So just explore it and see what you think. Now, the product on the right works in a totally different way. This is actually a piece of software that you install on each one of the devices. It's optimized for mobile devices, you know, tablets, phones, and so on. Yeah, and it sits in the background, basically just keeping an eye on what's going on. In fact, you won't even know it's installed if it's installed on the device. But it keeps an eye, and it can keep an eye on various activities, and it can give you little reports on how long they've been spent on social media or playing a particular game or app and so on. But of course, lots of products do that anyway now for parents, don't they? But it's got a few nice little whistles and bells as well. So for instance, let's say you've agreed that they do their homework between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. You can set it so that they can only access educational resources between 4 and 5, or log into Surbiton servers, you know, Surbiton School Service to do educational stuff. They can't play games with their friends. Or maybe you've said, you know, no internet after 9 o'clock. You can set it in that way as well, so it won't let them access it after 9. It's also got some quite good proactive features. So for instance, it's got a very extensive database of all the modern slang, shorthand, abbreviations, swear words, and so on. And if it comes across anything that is concerning, like say grooming language or something like that, it will take a snapshot of the screen with the offending dialogue on, turn it into an attachment, and email it to you, the parent, as evidence. But what I would say is that if you're going to do that and you've got any teenagers in the house, make sure they know. Yeah, because it's just you know, it's just going to be make your life significantly easier. Because if they think you're spying on them, then you'll just lose them. You'll lose any trust that they've got. So we need to make sure they understand why you're doing it, because perhaps you're concerned about a younger sibling in the household, you know, who you're a bit worried about. So that's a really good way then of making sure that they know, because after all, you know, let's face it, thinking back, we all said things to our friends, didn't we, when we were teenagers that you wouldn't have wanted mum or dad to hear, but there was nothing funny going on. There was no safeguarding, you know, issue. It was just kids letting off steam, and I think we need to, you know, we need to respect that, particularly as, after all, especially teenagers have had a pretty rough time the last couple of years, so you know they're going to want to let off steam now and again. I think we need to factor that in. But what I would say is, if you're going to install a product like Qustodio or something similar, whatever you do, don't fall into the trap that this family fell into.
What's it supposed to do?
It's cyber vigil software. It blocks your children from inappropriate websites.
Yeah, but I can clone that off Oscar's mum's computer.
Yeah, well, I decided to buy it rather than steal it.
It's so weird.
So, quick cup of tea, anyone? I'm making.
Well, do we really have to bother with this cyber visual thing?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
100%.
Why?
Because as responsible parents, we need something to defend this family from the dark and dangerous tentacles of the internet.
That's right.
Except we need you to install it, because we can't make head or tail of it.
Yeah, don't let him anywhere near it, whatever you do, because of course he'll have the power then. So if you really can't figure out the instructions for installing it, ask a family friend to do it, but don't let him anywhere near it. Okay, so in summary then, before we move on, number one advice, buy a mile, set those parental restrictions before they unwrap the gift. Heed the minimum age ratings on video games and apps, and be guided by age ratings for the other things, social media and so on. You can take a view on that because it's a little bit more fluid. Yes, install web filtering from your broadband providers, but don't just rely on whatever they do. You might need to add something else into the mix. Okay, so let's move on. Protecting themselves. Now, do you always know who they're talking to? I've put it in this way because there are an increasing number of apps and games these days, particularly social media apps, that allow you to live stream, basically. And live streaming is kind of like broadcasting from your bedroom. So, you know, it's like having a TV station there, wherein you can broadcast to 1 or even 1,000 people that might be elsewhere in the world. And as I said before, what could possibly go wrong? Obviously, we can see there are a few possible issues there. The brand leader in terms of live streaming as a part of its product is probably TikTok. And it's worth saying a little bit about TikTok. I've got an extract from a Panorama broadcast just over a year ago, just a couple of minutes, which I think illustrates it quite nicely. The Panorama program was about some of the issues around TikTok, and the bit I've chosen is about how relatively easy it is for young children to access really sometimes quite inappropriate content. So, for instance, there's a clip coming up with quite a lot of bleeps in it because of the swear words. But trust me, in the original, it's not bleeped. So the children were dancing to the unbleeped version of what you're about to hear. So I thought I'd tell you that in advance. So let's take a look at this little extract from the programme.
TikTok says you have to be 13 or over to use the app. It asks for your birthday when you sign up, but not for proof of age. That's standard across social media platforms. But in the UK, a study shows almost half of 8 to 12-year-olds use the app. And although TikTok says you can set your account to private, it didn't take me long to find hundreds of videos of extremely young children dancing and lip syncing to explicit songs like these.
Can't big on it. I got a bump on it. On me. Whip out my hump on it. I'm a badass you looking at. I'm gonna throw that back like a Cadillac. I don't care how you throw it, I'm gonna handle that. I'm gonna break this middle that.
TikTok says it doesn't tolerate sexually suggestive content involving a minor and removes it from the app. But how are children finding the videos they copy in the first place? Well, it seems they don't have to look very far. What makes TikTok different to most other social media platforms is the way it suggests what to watch. When you open the app, you're greeted by this. It's called the For You page. Every time you swipe, you're shown a new post. But these aren't just from people you know and follow. When you register, TikTok asks you what you're interested in, then starts monitoring your activity on the app to work out what videos to show you. It even spots how long you linger on a clip and sends you more of the same. The system is driven by an algorithm that uses powerful artificial intelligence, or AI. I want to get to grips with how it works, so I've set up a TikTok account as a young user. All I have to do is give my name, age, and an email or phone number. I'm pretending I'm 13 years old. This account's been set up on a new phone. I haven't given the algorithm anything at all, so I haven't searched for anything, haven't liked anything, haven't followed anyone. After 10 minutes of swiping, I came across the first disturbing clip, a pig falling off a truck. I allowed the video to play through several times, then carried on swiping. Shortly afterwards, the app showed me this clip of a confrontation in the street. Again, I lingered on the video, but didn't press like. Before long, I was being fed a stream of videos of people screaming profanities, a violent assault, a husband threatening to attack his wife, and a young man lying bloodied in the street. I've spent 20 minutes swiping, and the algorithm's feeding me violent, angry, increasingly upsetting content, and TikTok thinks I'm 13.
And of course, she could well have been considerably younger than 13 because there's no effective age checking. So I just wanted to just share some concerns about that with you. Now, another aspect in terms of protecting themselves, of course, is that we need to be careful not to overreact. So I would say, having thoroughly demonized TikTok, what I would say is it is perfectly possible to use it with an acceptable level of risk. But we shouldn't, but, you know, young children should not be alone in their bedrooms having live conversations with complete strangers. I mean, come on, yeah, that should be fairly obvious to all of us. So if a child is using TikTok, then, and I'm talking about, you know, below 13, certainly, then they need to be supervised. That doesn't mean you breathe down their neck every moment, but you need to be in such a space or nearby so that then they can say, you know, Mum, can you have a look at this? That's not very nice, is it? What should we do about it? And you can intervene. And in fact, that's an opportunity then to develop some digital resilience, so to speak, amongst the child, him or herself as well. So try not to demonize a particular game or app because it tends to be counterproductive. In fact, at worst, it then means, of course, that particular game or app acquires a mystique and becomes something that they must have. I mean, look at the hoo-ha over Squid Game a few months ago is a very good illustration of that, because there was this massive, you know, woo response from adults all over the place. It then became something that children as young as 7 were then seeking out to watch, with obviously potentially damaging consequences. Now, I've chosen a particular game here by way of illustrating some general points in terms of when you're not demonizing a game or app, what are the other things to look out for? And the one that I've chosen is Fortnite, which continues to be very popular and also continues to be quite demonized. So let's have a look at a few aspects of this. First of all, I'm talking about Fortnite Battle Royale, which is the multiplayer and free, but more about what free means in a minute, game. There's up to 100 players, and the idea is that you're the last one left standing at the end, okay, in which case you are the winner. Now, there's no blood or gore in it, unlike some of the 18-rated games, so, you know, you're not going to get blood splattered everywhere or a kidney flying across the screen or something, no. But there is a level of violence in it, which you could describe as sort of cartoon-type violence, I suppose, in a sense. Of course, I can't assume you've seen anybody ever playing it, so let's watch a little clip of somebody playing it so you get the idea of what it's like.
You know what? Hope you don't get shot in the back, but we're back in the ring again. Oh my gosh, jeez, my shoulders are actually hurting me. I've only been to his house like once before. I like to call it the haunted house. It's in the middle of the woods. It doesn't look like there's anyone here or anyone's been looting here. But is it beautiful? We've got a shotgun here. Whoa! Oh my god, Evie, I'm so sorry. I scared the living poop out of both myself and Evie. I swear to God, they were sitting behind a box, just waiting for someone to come up. And it was me.
So you see what I mean? I mean, personally, I don't have any huge problems with that level of violence. You see worse things in Tom and Jerry cartoons, I think, really, but you may well do. But because there is that level of violent activity in it, it acquires a PEGI 12 rating. So you remember what I said before about those ratings? That means it's a criminal offence for a retailer to provide access to Fortnite to anybody below that age. But that doesn't mean, of course, it's a criminal offence for them to play it. It just means it's a criminal offence for a retailer knowingly to supply it. So, of course, if you haven't set the age of the device, then Apple will assume they're 18. And so on. Actually, bad example, because there's a feud, isn't it, between Fortnite and Apple at the moment. But anyway, you take my point. So you might have concerns about the violence. Personally, I don't. But you may also have concerns about other aspects. For instance, they put under a fair bit of pressure to spend money in the game. Fortnite's big business. They have a turnover of well over $1 billion a year. And they get it all through in-app purchasing. So what happens is that you turn real money into what they call V-Bucks, and then you can spend those V-Bucks on various enhancements in the game. None of which, by the way, make any difference to how likely you are to win or lose. They're just cosmetic things. So, for instance, if you rather fancy your player in that snazzy red outfit there, that'll cost about £15. Now, if you were going to get a play suit arriving through the post, that's different. You know, you might think that's worthwhile, but no, you're not. It's literally just a digital change to what the character looks like. And some of these enhancements can get quite expensive. I'm told that there are these victory dances that you can get, that you can purchase, which then all the ones you've defeated have to watch at the end when you're the winner. And some of those can be 40, 50, 60 pounds, I'm told. So you can end up spending a significant amount of money in these products. And so you will obviously want to make sure that in-app purchases is one of the things that you've switched off in the parental safeguards, the parental restrictions section of that device. And so that'll be one of the things you'll want to make sure you switch off when you're setting up the device from day one. Now, you might also have concerns about the language, because trust me, if they've got their headsets on and they're all yakking to each other, then they're effing and jeffing all over the place. So if you've got concerns about that, then just tell them they can't use the headset for a bit, make them go on speaker, because they'll soon tone it down if they think the parents can hear what's going on. Yeah, so you may feel that you need to do that. And the final concern with these products that you might have is who they're playing against. Because, you know, they may be playing against a friend that you know that they know and they're a real person, but of course they might have invited other people into the game, these other third parties, or there may be older children now or even adults playing as well. And because they can all chat to each other, there is the admittedly small possibility, but there is the possibility that you might get somebody, you know, on the call, so to speak, who is not who they say they are, or indeed whose motives are not restricted to playing the game. So if you've got concerns about that, on most of these products, and certainly Fortnite is an example of this, on most of these products, you can set it so that they can only play against, you know, an in list, so to speak, a guest list of people that you've agreed they actually know. So that will be, you know, schoolmates, friends of the family, maybe cousins, or even some adults that you approve of, you know, that you're fine about. And they can't play anybody else. Now, it's possible on some of these products for them to go in and, if they know what they're doing, to switch off those safeguards, and so they're back to square one again. But what I would say is, you see, Mum said this to me a few years ago. She said, well, yeah, I've done all of that, but he just goes in and switches it all off again. To which I said, well, don't let him play then. He's abused your trust. Yeah, there has to be a kind of a contract about these things. OK, you can play the game, but it's my house, my rules. And so these are the rules. And then if he does go in and switch the settings off, don't let him play it for 2 weeks. You'll soon get the message. I think sometimes you've just got to be a bit of a parent about these things, haven't you? We'd all like to be their best chum. But that's not necessarily what they want in these situations, or certainly not what they need. Yeah. And so, you know, just sometimes you've got to take it on the chin and be a parent and say, right, that's it. You're not playing it for 2 weeks because you've disobeyed what I said, you know, and they'll soon get the message if we keep that up. So, in summary, then, I would say try not to demonize a particular game or app, emphasize behavior for staying safer. Last time I'll nag you, set the parental controls on those blooming devices, because you will get so many, you know, so many things will then never happen as a result of that, because the bad people can't get at them, so to speak. Yeah. Yes, make sure especially if they're going online, that they're being adequately supervised, appropriate to their age, because obviously you can ease off a bit when they get a little bit older. As I said before, try not to go off on one if something does go wrong, because if they think you're going to do that, well, they might tell you the first time, but they certainly won't tell you the next time something goes wrong. And we need to make sure that anything that they're getting up to is on our radar, yeah, rather than below the radar. Also, I would say model good behavior yourself. So build their digital resilience, so to speak. Yeah. So by modeling good behavior, I mean, if you have a rule, say no tablets at the dinner table, then don't have your phone. I don't care how important that message is that you're waiting for from work is, because whatever they're waiting for or working on is just as important to them in their own lives. Yeah. So do model good behavior yourself, and talk to them again about their use of social media as well. So one of the issues in terms of social media overuse, and I stress overuse, is its effect on sleep. And in fact, several studies have linked sleep disturbance to spending too much time on screen with social media. Especially sometimes young people will, if they've got their device in their bedroom, and police try to make sure they don't, and don't take any nonsense about, oh, I need it because I have to charge it up. Well, okay, well then give me the charger then, and I'll plug it in downstairs. So, you know, setting times in the middle of the night to wake up to check their phone. And of course, the blue light as well that these devices emit by default has been shown to be deleterious to sleep patterns. And of course, sleep is so important to development of adolescence, yes, to correct brain growth in adolescence. And so with that in mind, most devices these days that are portable, they do have a facility to be able to shift the color balance from a bluish to more of a yellowish tint. It's called Night Shift, for instance, on Apple devices, and it looks like this. If you tap the appropriate icon, it changes the hue of the screen to something that's more like that, sort of yellowy green, rather than being bluish, which is reckoned to be less deleterious. Another aspect of social media of concern sometimes is this over comparing what one's doing with what other people are doing, and forming the impression wrongly that you know, everyone else is having a marvelous time and our life is really, really boring. I mean, there was a time, wasn't there? Some of you might be old enough to remember. Do you remember Friends Reunited years ago? Social media used to be about connecting with others, but it's not really anymore, is it? It's much more about comparing what you're getting up to with other people. There's this increasingly passive use of social media where we're comparing what we're doing with some highly curated version of other people's lives, because of course they're only going to present the best stuff to you, aren't they? And they tend to miss out the boring stuff, as a result of which also people tend to post stuff when they're feeling really good about themselves, and they tend to look for what other people are doing when they're on perhaps a bit of a low. But of course that makes it even worse, because then we feel even worse, you know, more inadequate. We'll never measure up to whatever other people are doing. So how can we help in terms of this? Well, I think we've got to introduce a level of balance into this with young people. Talk to them about, is it actually valid to seek this constant approval from people that don't really know them in terms of, you know them in real life, comparing what they're doing with highly curated versions of what other people are doing and feeling worthless as a result of it. So make them, of course, and you'll seem like an old fogey when you say it, but make them see that it is important to get a good night's sleep. Encourage them to make informed choices about switching off, okay, at night. And of course, if they won't do that, use some of the products that I've mentioned to enforce that. And remind them, of course, you know, there really are other ways of socializing. I know it's been difficult for them over the last 18 months, 2 years, but ask them to evaluate whether actually they have the balance right. And to help with that, this is a site I can definitely recommend to you. Rise Above. Tap this screen, and at the moment the site's down. I checked earlier today, but I think it's temporary. It should be working, I hope, soon. Excellent advice for particularly teenagers with coping with, you know, life's sort of general travails, and particularly social media issues. So I can certainly commend that site to you. While we're at it, at the upper end of the scale we're talking about, if your teen is turning 13, it's a perfect opportunity for them to reset their social media ages on lots of products. Because you see, if they're honest about their age, and they feel they can be from now on, of course, because they really are 13, then the safeguards that a lot of these products have built into them between the age of 13 and 18 will then be operating as they should. Whereas, let's say if they signed up to something when they were 9, then by the time they really are 13, then that product will think that they are 17 going on 18, and they won't be getting the protections that they otherwise need. So here is a separate sheet on your in your link that I gave you at the beginning, and I'll redo it at the end, to a sheet for parents that will show you how you can get them to change their age. It won't affect any of their social media content or any of their chats or anything. It simply means that they'll then get an appropriate level of protection which they've been enjoying up to now. Now, I mentioned screen time before, but I want to actually debunk screen time a little bit, because there's an awful lot of nonsense spoken about screen time. And here on one sheet from the UK Chief Medical Officer is some excellent advice for parents and carers on getting a grip on screen time, and maybe not obsessing about it too much, because rather than screen time in terms of the quantity of time they're spending, much more important consideration is the quality of whatever they're doing when they are on screen, online, so to speak. I won't bother going through any of this now. Have a look in your own time. But it's got very sensible, common sense suggestions from the UK Chief Medical Officer. Now, in terms of sharing and oversharing stuff, like this, say, for instance, let's say if some of their friends go online and that's the first thing they find about your child, well, they're going to be a bit stigmatized for a while, aren't they? So one thing that I suggest that you do now and again, it sounds a little bit creepy, stalky, but it's worthwhile Googling your child now and again, just to see what any person who doesn't know them, any member of the public, could find out about them. Because you see, for many young people, you can pretty easily discover some basic facts about them, like, say, their full name, their birthday and their age. And obviously, if you know somebody's birth year and age, that means, of course, you know their date of birth. But it doesn't stop there. Do a bit more digging around in Auntie Doris's Facebook page that she's, of course, left public so anybody can see. And the chances are you'll find a whole host of pictures that she's posted up about your child, because, of course, she loves them and she's proud of them. Pictures in their school uniform, goodness knows what else, but also basic information that any nasty person could work out just by the information that your relatives have put up about your child. So, for instance, the chances are you'll also find things like name of their first school, favorite teacher, first pet's name, grandparents' names. And if you're thinking grandparents' names, so what? Think about it. If you know somebody's grandparents' names, then that probably means that you know their mother's parents' surname. And if you know their mother's parents' surname, that probably in turn also means that you know their mother's maiden name. So, mother's maiden name, first pet, favourite teacher, name of first school. This ought to be ringing some bells, because these are typically the security questions that you get asked if you've forgotten your password. Yeah, here's an example in Windows 10. So what we have here is a potential minefield of information just waiting for some bad person to discover about your child. So when you're Googling them, or for that matter, if they're Googling themselves, which is something I also suggest to young people that they do now and again, if you find some of this stuff, then I'd have a polite word with Auntie, let's say, and say, look, Auntie, you know, you really shouldn't be putting up public pictures of so-and-so in their school uniform. It's not considered a safe thing to do. So ask them to make this stuff go private, so that only people, you know, in the family can see this sort of stuff, rather than the whole world. Because it will place your child potentially at risk, or it could do. Now, there's a name for this phenomenon. Rather unfairly, it's called sharenting, which is a bit unfortunate, really, because it's not usually you guys who are the culprits. It's aunties, uncles, grandparents, and so on. But do have a word with them and get stuff taken down if you discover stuff that's not appropriate about your child. Here's a page I hope you'll never need, but it's worth knowing it's there. If you do come across stuff that's completely unacceptable, you need to get taken down, then along the top of that page there are some categories of offensive stuff, and it will give you further advice how to take it down. This is from an organisation called the Internet Watch Foundation, which are one of the few organisations that have the legal power to block websites at national level. So they can block any web page that ends in .uk. And if it doesn't end in .uk, they can refer it to another country's similar system, and they can do it as well. So I hope you never need to use it, but if you do, it's nice to know that you can get stuff blocked, and that page is your gateway to do it. So in summary, because I'm coming up to my deadline now, try not to demonize a particular game or app. It's counterproductive. Emphasize behavior generally for staying safer. Last time I'll nag you. Set those parental safeguards on their devices. Make sure they're being adequately supervised if they're going online. Try not to go mad if a mishap occurs. Model good behavior, okay? Build their digital resilience. And here's a final link again to that internetmatters.org. they have something called the Digital Resilience Toolkit, which has some excellent advice for parents and carers of all ages of children, which I can commend to you as well. Tap that screen and it will take you to it. And my final one to leave you with is make sure they know what to do if they do get that uh-oh feeling, if things are not going right, and they know they can talk to you or an adult they trust, because they know your response is going to be a supportive one. So I've just brought it in under the wire there at 10 to, as I promised. There's my email address. Apologies for being ridiculously long. Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen. Sorry, let me put that back up again. My apologies. There we go. There's my email address. I'm not sure why it went. No, there we go. Okay, lovely. And what I will do is I'll bring up that code again at the beginning for anybody who was late and leave it on the screen. But other than that, I will shut up now. And we can take any questions if anybody's got them. So there's the link again from before. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Peter. Sorry, a bit husky there, having not spoken for 40 minutes or so. We do have a couple of questions, Peter. So I think while you're on screen, we'll put those your way. So the first question is, what's to stop your child changing the parental locks that you set up?
Well, if you set them up, if you protect those settings with a strong enough password that only you know, and certainly isn't the same as the unlocking code, of course, for the device, then it's quite difficult for them to do it. Really, all that they would be able to do, and this would work, would be to reset the device. So basically to do a complete reset of the thing and put it back to factory settings. But if they do that, they're still on a hiding into nothing, because the next time that they sync the device to whatever, you know, wherever the data is being backed up, it'll just reinstall everything again. So they're back to square one again. But the other thing I would say as well is if they do that, then they've broken the rules. So I think it's perfectly reasonable for you then to say, right, well, in that case, you're not using it for 2 weeks or whatever. And of course, for most teenagers, in terms of the phone, the chances are pretty high that you're paying the phone bill. Well, that's immensely powerful position to be in, isn't it? Because if they really are abusing that device, then stop paying the phone bill. They'll soon get the message.
Thank you, Peter. There's another question here which says, are there any new apps that are causing concern for you?
Oh my goodness, where do I start? I mean, every day another one comes along. Can I recommend one that I haven't mentioned yet, which is an absolute mine of information around these sorts of products? It's an organisation based in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. Which is rather an odd spelling, actually. It's called Ineque, but Ineque is spelled INEQE. INEQE.com. And they're eagle-eyed on this stuff. And if you go to the parent section there, you will find all of their latest bulletins. And in fact, actually, I'd recommend you subscribe, actually, because then you'll get daily updates about, you know, the latest apps that there are concerns about and so on. That's what I use as my source. But it would be kind of useless for me, really, to I mean, I'd never get anything else done. I'd have to keep updating the blooming thing every day with something new. But I can commend certainly Ineque.com to you, which is definitely worth checking out as a source of further information on all the latest concerns that we've got.
Thank you, Peter. For the moment, that appears to be all of the questions that we have. I think that I suspect that a lot of people feel like me. It was incredibly thorough. And as I was thinking of questions as I went through the talk, you were shortly answering them, just not long after. So speaking as a parent, I'm just very grateful for it being so thorough. So thank you for your time. Yeah, I think that's it. So without further ado, if that's okay with you, Peter, I'm just going to say thank you for your time again. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, because you work in our local area with Kingston and Richmond, Achieving for Children, it's good to have that sort of local knowledge. I said at the beginning that I'd watched this talk every year now for the last 4 or 5 years. The most amazing thing is I've learned some new things now. I must confess, my son has just started playing Fortnite in the last couple of weeks. So I feel I'm going to pay close attention to that and maybe have the speakers running at the same time as the headphones, which I think is an option on an Xbox that I didn't know. Oh, we've had a couple of questions come in at the last. Okay. Here we go. It says just here, is it safer to buy a child their own device than give them yours to play on?
I would tend to avoid giving them yours to play. I mean, I heard one parent one time told me that she's so sick and tired of her 4-year-old wanting to play Candy Crush on her phone that she's put her daughter's thumbprint into the into the ID button on the phone. No, that's a really bad idea. So I would tend to avoid that situation because it's just too risky. Because if the phone thinks that they're you, i.e. an adult, then without necessarily the child being naughty or trying to do something bad, they may well end up. I mean, I get this a lot with my nephew. my nephew's 5-year-old used to constantly accidentally send me gibberish texts because he was playing on the phone and didn't know what he was doing. So I would tend to advise against that.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And then, sorry, I got excited. The other two weren't questions, but they are thank you. So one says thank you, very thorough, if a little daunting, and the other is thank you for an excellent and very thorough presentation. So there you go. I think everyone does agree with me, Peter. It really is thorough. We're extremely grateful. Thank you again to everybody who's been online this evening and has listened to this. If you know anybody who wasn't able to make it as a parent, if you're speaking to anyone at the school gate, please let them know that they can watch it by this same link. They can click on this link at any point and the presentation will start from the beginning. We're also probably going to share it through a letter that we'll send out on Friday as a reminder to everybody to watch it if they haven't, with the link to the resources that Peter shared at the beginning. And I've also know that Mr. Williams and Mrs. Chong, I think, will be putting it in the ops update for those who are prep parents, so that you'll have a chance to just click that link again and watch it. And please do encourage people. I hope you agree that it's a really good use of 50 minutes of any parent's time. Potentially even some of those who are younger than the ones we've requested to join this evening. I'll be thinking next year that maybe we include the year 4s, given that my son is a year 4 pupil. So thank you again for your time, everybody. Thank you, Peter. Please do let people know that they can watch this at any point. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.